So my name is Dr. Simon McNair. I am a Leverhulme Early Career Research Fellow at the Centre for Decision Research here at Leeds University Business School. And I am chiefly interested in financial decision making, particularly with respect to individual level psychological factors that might influence how people think or act or feel in relation to their finances. And I study these kinds of relationships in relation to domains such as debt and financial distress, and also at a more consumer level in relation to how everyday consumers think about how much they spend, how much they borrow, and how much they save for things like retirement. And I do my research in partnership with several organisations and have done with global organisations such as Aon and Grant Thornton. At a national level, I've worked with Citizens Advice and Suitable Strategies. And at a more local level here in Leeds, I've worked with community-based organisations such as Money Buddies. Financial capability is a concept that represents the kinds of characteristics and circumstances that are thought necessary in order for somebody to be able to make effective and well-informed financial decisions. And it's a concept that here in the UK was originated by the old Financial Services Authority. And at that point in time, our understanding of what it meant to be financially capable was very much rooted in practical and pragmatic considerations. So to be financially capable, it meant that you had to have factual understanding and awareness about how to manage your finances, how to manage budgets, how to understand what different financial products were and their implications for you as a consumer. But more recently, we've had an updated kind of sense of understanding of what financial capability is, thanks to research by the UK's Money Advice Service, which is the organisation in the UK that oversees and directs the provision of financial advice and debt advice. And their longitudinal research has overhauled our understanding of what financial capability is. So whereas before there was much emphasis on practical and pragmatic considerations, now there's much more emphasis being placed on the role of psychological factors in financial capability, what the Money Advice Service calls mindset factors. And this really refers to things like people's attitudes, their motivations, and also their ability to be psychologically resilient and to cope with financial shocks and financial distress. So with our new understanding of what financial capability is and what it entails, there's now a real call for greater understanding and awareness of how these kinds of psychological factors may influence things like how we provide debt advice to people in the UK. But the situation with debt advice in the UK is that debt advice services are really constrained. We're talking about a situation where demand for these services far outstrips supply. And also in recent times, a number of debt advice organisations have suffered a number of financial cutbacks, which has further constrained their ability to provide their services. And so what that means is that debt advisors are really in a situation where they necessarily have to focus on assisting their clients with the practical side of their situations. So that is things like helping clients to maximise their income whenever budgets might be tight, on things like helping their clients to deal with creditors, on helping their clients to work out what feasible repayment plans might be if they're in arrears, and otherwise just helping clients to better manage their finances. Debt advisors are not in a situation where they can also help people with the more psychological or emotional burdens that often accompany financial distress, and they're often not trained to be able to give that kind of advice also. So as a psychologist, I'm very keenly aware of the kinds of implications that the emotional burdens and psychological burdens that accompany financial distress can often have on people, particularly in relation to what those kinds of burdens can mean for people's capacities to confront and effectively address their financial situation. To give you an example, if we imagine somebody who is experiencing debt and who is maybe tasked with the prospect of sitting down and working out the extent of their financial circumstances, and that's a daunting prospect for a lot of people at the best of times, and it's a task that can cause people to become upset or stressed or anxious or worried, and those kinds of emotional burdens in turn and emotional barriers in turn can cause people to perhaps avoid doing that task or delay doing that task. And so if we can help people to better cope with those kinds of emotional barriers, it may in turn mean that we can facilitate them to more effectively address these kinds of situations. So over the course of the next 3 years, I'm conducting a Leverhulme Early Career Research Fellowship project in partnership with Citizens Advice. Citizens Advice are the largest independent provider of debt advice in the UK, and debt is the second most frequent issue that they deal with amongst their clients. I'm working with the offices here in Leeds and also in Bradford. And the aim of this project is to develop a resource that gives targeted advice and support for debt advice clients, particularly to deal with the kinds of emotional and psychological burdens that often accompany financial distress. So as part of phase 1 of this project, we have conducted in-depth interviews with Citizens Advice debt advisors and their clients. And we've asked questions about the kinds of emotional concerns that people who are experiencing debt often face, and the kinds of emotional barriers that may prohibit them or disinhibit them from seeking support or advice for these kinds of circumstances. In phase 2 of the project, what we're going to do is investigate the wider prevalence of these kinds of emotional concerns to try and get a sense of what are the most commonly occurring of these kinds of concerns amongst citizens advice, debt advice clients. And subsequently, we will use that information to then focus the development of the advice resource in terms of the types of issues and concerns that it addresses, and also the types of advice and support that it provides. And then in the final part, and the final phase of the project, what we will do is we will administer this resource to a selection of citizens advice, debt advice clients. We will track them over time and try to investigate whether the provision of this extra layer of emotional or psychological support can yield any additional value to the advice process in terms of clients' emotional well-being and in terms of their financial well-being.